trying to take off here. All right, tonight we're talking about the beginning of Jesus' week. Now, it would have worked out great if it was about 4 chapters ahead when we're talking about when Jesus talks about the end time, but it's not. We'll get to it in a couple of weeks. There should be one back there still.
There's still one back there.
Yeah, okay. So in verse 1 of chapter 21, it says, "And when they drew nigh unto Jerusalem, and were come to Bethphage, unto the Mount of Olives, then sent Jesus 2 disciples." Saying unto them, "Go into the village over against you, and straightway ye shall find an ass tied, and a colt with her. Loose them, and bring them unto me. And if any man say aught unto you, you shall say, The Lord hath need of them, and straightway he will send them. And all this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet Isaiah, the prophet. Tell ye the daughter of Zion, Behold, thy king cometh unto thee, meek and sitting upon an ass, a colt in the foal of an ass. And the disciples went and did as he commanded." Okay. So, as we said, this is the last week. In this particular time, it's one commentary I read said it was 4 days till Passover. Okay, so 4 more days before Passover was coming. That's representative because whenever they bring their lambs or their doves or their sacrifice to the priests, they have to bring them into Jerusalem early. Okay? So that's what it's a parallel. He's coming because this parallels the sacrifice as the perfect lamb. As you bring the lamb in, the priests have to look at it. If it's not good enough, they'll say, "No, you can't use this lamb. You got to go use somebody, get another one." And that'll come up here later in this chapter when they do that. But so this is fulfilling a prophet, Isaiah. It was in Isaiah that talks about that it's going to be fulfilling this when it happens. So they were coming down. They were up in the northern part of Galilee. They went down and went into Jericho, and then they're coming on down this last week that we talked about it. Now they're in Bethphage, which is actually, Jerusalem's here. It's right in the middle. In the valley, separating the Mount of Olives, it's on this side, is the Kidron Valley. Right at the top, just over the top of the Mount of Olives, somewhere up there is Bethphage. Okay, so basically all he has to do is go from there down the valley up into the other side of the hillside, and it's about a mile, maybe 2 miles. Like I said, they don't know exactly where Bethphage was. It was on the way from Bethany, because here in a little bit they go back to Bethany. But so it's not very far away. So they went down and drew nigh unto Jerusalem. He's told them at least twice already, "I have to go to Jerusalem." And they knew that because it was getting to be that time of year where all the men would go into Jerusalem for the Passover, for the particular time. They had to go twice a year to make the sacrifice for them. So up until this time, he had come in and left quietly. He hadn't gone in. He would usually raise a ruckus because he would go in and talk to the Pharisees, and they would get all upset and try to, catch him in something. Or one place they was going to throw him off the wall or throw him off the mountain, and another place, but all the time it wasn't his time, so he left. He got away from them somehow. So now he's coming, but he's not coming as they expect him to come. He's trying to tell them his whole 30 or the 3 years that his disciples was with him, and the whole time in his life. He's trying to tell the people that they're not listening. I'm coming, but I'm not coming as a conquering king. He didn't say it in those so many words. If he was coming now as a conquering king, he would come in on a white horse. Anytime a reigning king or another king from a country would come into Jerusalem or come into the capital, they would usually come in a carriage or on white horses. White horses are powerful. They are, just for the kings. They're usually the only ones that can own them because they cost a lot to own. The donkeys and the smaller, the burdensome animals, the oxes and things like that, they didn't cost as much. But so they were here. He told them to go and talk to this guy, and you'll find a donkey with its baby there, and come, get those for them, is what he's telling them to do. Now, the colt, or the young donkey, in one commentary, or in one part of it, I think it's Luke, maybe if you go back and read that part of it instead of Matthew, it says that it had never been ridden. You think that's a problem? Anybody ever tried to ride a horse that's never been ridden? What do they do when they ride a horse? They break them. You have to break a horse to get used to something. So you can just imagine the little something getting on its back and it not knowing what's going on. But it was perfectly fine with it as we go through the story. Because he was.
We read this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But, so many times, especially John and different ones, it said this had to happen so the scripture might be fulfilled.
Right.
These people, okay, we're talking about things they knew, okay? They knew that, they knew how the kings and royalty come in on their horses and stuff. And then all of a sudden, here comes this guy on this donkey. Never been ridden before.
Right.
It's just like, if you doubt the Word of God, read it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And see what's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
And what is going to happen.
Now you'll have some people come up and say, okay, he read that and he said that's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. He went and did it. He told us. Well, yeah, he did, because he did know it. It's kind of like, yeah, he knew that was going to happen. As God, both God and man, he knew that was written by Isaiah and that it was about him at this time. So, some people, they just look at it and they say, oh, you knew that ahead of time, so you just did it to make sure that you fulfilled that. Okay, you could say that about anybody, but once you start lining up, okay, Jesus did this, he did this, he did this, and start looking at all the old prophecies that it fulfilled, no one person ever fulfilled those, except Jesus. And the bottom, page 2, it says, your king is coming to you, lowly and sitting on a donkey. And we don't go all through it. We don't read it all. It's too much information, Harold, to read. It's good information. And you go back and read it. It's really good commentary, usually. That he came in on a colt, as was customary for royalty. So it was a royalty to come on one that was a young one. He came to Jerusalem as the Prince of Peace. Says donkeys or asses were old beasts that great persons used to ride on. Judges 10 and 12 talks about it. But after Solomon's time, the Jews got a breed of horses, so as only poor people rode the donkeys or the asses, mostly reserved for the burdens or to put stuff on them to carry it. Therefore, those with eyes to see, Jesus was not only proclaiming his messiahship and his fulfillment of Scripture, but showing the kind of peace-loving approach he was now making to the city. When the king come in riding on the horse, I was just reading this story the other day in 2 Kings, and they sent a rider out and said, are you for peace or are you not? Because he's coming, they don't know. If he's coming, he may be a conquering king. But here he's coming in on a donkey, showing that he's not going to disrupt anything. He's not going to change anything except the religiosity.
Okay. It wasn't because he was tired. I mean,
no. He walked everywhere else. He just walked from Galilee at 60 miles, or more. So it wasn't. He did it to fulfill a purpose. Okay, chapter 7 to 11, Brother Epson.
And brought the ass and the colt and put on them their clothes, and they set him thereon. And a great multitude spread their garments in the way. Others cut down branches from the trees and strewed them in the way. And the multitude that went before and that followed cried, saying, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And when he was come unto Jerusalem, all the city was moved, saying, Who is this? And the multitude said, This is Jesus, the prophet of Nazareth of Galilee. Excuse me.
So he got the attention of the people, because they started saying, Who is this? Now, like we said before, he moved around a lot. He didn't carry suitcases. He may have had a little pack or something to carry on. They had to put their clothes on him to make a saddle for him, someplace to sit, because animals have bones in them. And if you're riding very far, it's not very comfortable. Even the Indians, they throw a blanket up over a lot of times they wouldn't just do it bareback. Some people do, but some people don't. And others, they laid their clothes down in front of him as he walked in and laid down branches. They took up branches off of it. Now this was typical. Tearing the branches down off the trees was typical about this time of year, because this was the time of the Feast of Tabernacles. Remember? And because of that, the Feast of Tabernacles is also called the Feast of Booths. The tabernacle is a temporary structure that they set aside for a week, and they stay outside and cook their dinner and cook everything. It's to remind them of their trek from Egypt. They didn't have houses. They didn't have anything. So all this is kind of relating back to it as you would think, well, why tear the trees down and stuff? Well, it's not. It's just getting the branches down to put like the boughs on top of them, of the booth that they had there. And even then, they cried out to him, Hosanna, Son of David. Hosanna means save now. Okay? And was dressed to kings, like in 2 Samuel 14 and 2 Kings 6. They openly give Jesus the title appropriate for the Messiah. This is the people, okay, that's saying this. Son of David, he who comes in the name of the Lord. And Jesus, this is almost the first time that he received this worship. A lot of times he's telling them, don't go tell anybody, don't go do any of this. Now he's saying, okay, I received this. He acknowledges it. Yes, I am the Messiah. Yes, I am that.
And in verse 8, something that struck me was, it wasn't a great multitude.
No.
It was a very great multitude.
Yeah.
So, sometimes we forget. We wasn't there. And you just get a picture of just, thousands out there.
Kind of watching that Chosen series when we watched it, and it got in my mind. Every time they were saying, yeah, they didn't want to gather together because a riot would start. They would start doing it. Well, when you notice that in the shows, it's like 8 or 10 people. Because in Jerusalem, 8 or 10 people is going to crowd a road. The road's only about this wide between houses, and that many people, So if they're saying it's a very great crowd, it's a lot of people that's lining the roads and lining the sides and cheering them on as they come on. Now, here just in a few hours later, they're going to be booing and hissing it. But that's in a few chapters as we come a little further on. It says when he come into Jerusalem, all the city was moved. So evidently, and you got to remember, it's ours. It wouldn't be Houston. Everybody in Houston would know. You don't know one side or the other of Tulsa what's going on, let alone a huge city. Jerusalem was large, but it wasn't that large. So they could hear the uprising from one side, and they start gathering and hear what's going on, and the whole city was moved. It said when the Magi came looking for the King of the Jews, all Jerusalem was troubled. Now, when the King arrives, all the city is stirred or moved. So it just here again, he's making some changes. Just his presence being there. And they were happy at that particular time. They were happy with what was going on. And they identified him, of course, as the prophet. A lot of people didn't know, had heard of who it was. Well, they had a lot of goings on at that time. People came, preaching and doing things. They had John the Baptist, we know of. There were other zealots that are talking about that they would, come up and preach. They identified him as Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee. So that let him know and let us know it's the same man. It's the same person that had been all this, going on. Iris, you want to read 12 and 13 for us?
And Jesus went into the temple of God and cast out all of them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers, and the seats of them that sold doves, and said unto them, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves.
Okay. Now, he had done this before. Okay. In another of the Gospels, he did it earlier. Maybe even the first time he came into Jerusalem. This time, it's the last time that he's coming into Jerusalem. And so what's the problem? I've never kind of understood what the problem was until I read this chapter in depth. We talked about before that when you bring a sacrifice, what are you supposed to bring?
Your best.
Your best.
Your very best.
Your best. But what the people were doing and what the Pharisees and the Sadducees had come up with was, oh, you're traveling a long ways. You don't have to go that far. We'll provide, if you just bring us a little money, you can buy one here. It may not be your best. It may not be their best. And the price is like here. It's certainly not going to be the best. It's going to be high. They were robbing the people blind, is what they were doing at that particular time. So he went in there and he cast them out. He said, You've made it a den of thieves. Now, this is inside. It's not in the temple, but it's in the area in front of the temple. This is the place where the Gentiles could come. Okay? It's a place where others could come besides the Jewish. The Jewish people could come here. They could come. The Jewish people could come even further inside, because then they would take their sacrifice to the priest inside the temple compound, and they would perform the sacrifice with
You're
them.
not supposed to have a price. You're supposed to be not only perfect, they're supposed to be priceless.
It's supposed to be for them. They started making, like anybody else, they made it where it's not really, it's something a routine. Okay, I go do this, and I'll be good for the year. We have that. We get into a routine, and we start doing those things. Well, I'll go Sunday, every Sunday. I won't miss. Well, just like they said, I can't remember who was saying it, just because you come to church doesn't mean you're Christian. It's just like, a car sitting in a garage all the time. It's there. It's not a garage, but it could be anything. Any person coming into the church is just a person unless they accept Christ into their life. Once they do that, then they have a purpose of coming to the church and trying to win other people for them. And it's not just something they're trying to follow like what God had told them to do, told us to do. So he forcibly stopped the desecration of what was going on. He threw the money changers out, probably turned the cages over, the cages, or opened up the pens or whatever they had for the animals and let them all out. So he was really upset in the apple cart, if you want to say that.
They mentioned there that they were charging almost 20 times more expensive.
Yeah.
Inside the gym, I mean.
Exactly. And the whole thing was, again, when we read about it, when we were going through Numbers and Exodus, if you were poor, you could bring just a turtle dove for certain sacrifices. Well, here they're charging way more than it should be. So once he cleansed the area, got it cleansed, he went on. 14 was their birthday. You want to read it?
And a blind and a lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them.
Okay. So the people, the whole city knew who this guy was. And they knew the miracles that was happening. So he changed it from being a place of a den of thieves to a place of healing. And it was out there in the area where anybody could come to him. Not just the Jewish people, but the Gentile too. Anybody who was in that area that he could heal them. It says, after driving out the money changers and the merchants from the temple courts, Jesus didn't establish the society for cleansing the temple. Okay? He got back to doing business of the Messiah, which was showing the power of God, his compassion, and also his mercy. Okay, Janet, you want to read 15 through 17 for us?
And when the chief priests and scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying in the temple and saying, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were sore displeased, and said to him, Hearest thou what these say? And Jesus saith unto them, Yea, have you never read, Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings thou hast perfected praise? And he left them and went out of the city into Bethany, and he lodged there.
Okay. So it's kind of like goes back to the story of when he was telling the Pharisees off up in Galilee, and the disciples said, they didn't like that. And he goes, yeah, I know. Well, here it is too. He knew that. They were sore. They didn't like it because the people were gathering. I mean, once you start having miracles, if somebody's getting a miracle there, being blind, being healed, all these things, they just keep coming. And he had to just kind of quit because he was getting tired. He left the city and went on. And they may not have heard. It said the whole city knew, so at first they may not have been there, but after he threw the money changers out and upset their money, now how did they get paid? How did the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they are priests, how did they get paid? Remember?
Yeah, people pay them.
People paid them. How did they pay?
For taxes.
No, not through taxes. There was some taxes, but through the tithe, but through the sacrifices. They would get on certain sacrifices. Remember we had the burnt sacrifices, we had the drink sacrifices, all these sacrifices. Some of the sacrifices, the priests got half of the sacrifice. They would get the right breast or the right shoulder. Yeah, that's what, and they would also get the hide. If it was a cow, they'd get the hide. If it was a sheep, a lot of times they'd get the wool. And then they would turn around and sell those items, and that's how they helped profit. There was a small tax that they paid once every 3 years. That was mainly for the widows, though. But typically, that's how they got paid. Well, they wanted to supplement their income, so that's where they started with this sacrifice. Bringing the sacrifices in for them. We'll just make it easier for the people. I can hear them now. That's kind of like our politicians. We'll just have it where they can buy it right here. We'll charge them a little bit more because it costs us, something to come. Oh, anyway. So, and it didn't say, you know, the chief priests and the scribes, they were hacked off, wasn't they? They were mad. But it was for the wrong reason. Everybody was happy.
They were jealous.
They were jealous, exactly. They were jealous of what was going on. And then hearing the crowd call him the Son of God, that was really what was getting them up in
And
arms.
nobody was paying them to do it.
No. You know, supposedly they'd move out of the way. Here comes the priest, get out of the way. Here comes the Sadducees, Pharisees, get out of the way. But even the children were crying out, said, out of the mouths of babes, thou hast perfected praise. Even those little children could understand that this was the Messiah. They could see what was happening, what was going on. So they were, instead of happy, they were indignant. So he left him and went out of the city to Bethany. Okay, it's a little bit further, like we said, than what he was before. It says, because this was the time of the Passover, and thousands of people were there, pilgrims. So there wasn't any place for him to stay. So he left. Like I said, it was a ways out. It wasn't that far out. And it says here that he went in Luke, at Passover time, quarters could not easily in the city, but the house of Mary and Martha would be open to Jesus. So evidently Mary and Martha lived there in Bethany, and that's where he probably went. Okay? So we pick it up the next morning, 18 and 19. Harold, you want to read that for us?
Now in the morning, as he returned into the city, he hungered. And when he saw a fig tree in the way, he came to it, and found nothing thereon but leaves only, and said unto it, let no fruit grow on it.
Henceforth forever. Did not leave that off.
It's like,
It's a light in there? Okay, sorry. Yeah. Don't grow ever, only henceforth and presently the fig tree withered away.
A withered way doesn't mean that it died completely.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still standing all that time.
It was standing,
Yeah.
but it withered. What does withered look like?
Crumpled up.
Crumpled up. Withered is something that you look at and it's like, that's dead. That ain't coming back alive. You look at your tomato plant, it's like, oh, it's wilted. You know, like one thing, pour a little water on it, it pops up.
Yeah.
Or this is not. It's not more, it's more than wilted. It's withered up. It's all, you know, together. So,
He could have actually put figs on the tree,
he could have.
but he didn't do that.
Yeah. And he's telling this because, again, his disciples are around him with this time, and they saw him do this. They saw him do this once before. Okay? He saw the fig tree, and there wasn't no figs on it, and he cursed it. And then he came back later and the fig tree withered up. Well, this time, he talked to it, and it withered right before their eyes. There was nothing because and why? Why do you think, you know, that seems, to me, it seems like, wow, that's so cruel.
Well, he could make it grow back if he wanted to.
Yes, but he didn't.
It was a lesson.
It was, what is it? It's a fruit tree.
Yeah, it's a fruit.
It's something to provide fruit. And something that they would eat in the morning.
It's delicious too. I love figs.
Figs, their dates over there were huge. When we were over there, oh, they were good dates. And all their fruit and vegetable. I don't think I had a picture. I didn't show you a picture of their fruits, but they had carrots that was like this long and huge. They're vegetables. They do grow great vegetables.
I grew up in Arizona where we had figs.
Mhm.
My dad one picked figs off the tree. We had and dates, and we had fresh cantaloupe. You can't get them here in the store. They're just old green out there. They were ripe, ready to eat. And then we got all kinds of vegetables out of farmland and just fresh stuff.
And that's what, you know, our little guide that we had over there, that she basically said that's what she eats. She was vegetarian. And we'd ask her something, and she said, well, that's not in season right now. We can't. we don't have that because they can't easily import bananas from, South America. By the time they get there, they're ruined. Or strawberries, or whatever. But when whatever's in season, it's growing, it's good.
They had a big pile of cantaloupes out there, they just throw them out because it's too ripe to ship, and Dad bring them home, and man, you talk about
Oh, they were good. Yeah, they were real
nothing
good.
that tastes like that out at the grocery store here.
No. Harold, you want to read 20, this Harold? Morrison, you want to read 20, 21, and 22 for us? It's on the bottom of page 10.
And when the disciples saw it, they marveled, saying, How soon is the fig tree withered away? Jesus answered and said unto them, Verily I say unto you, if ye have faith and doubt not, ye shall not only do this which is done to the fig tree, but also if ye shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, it shall be done. And all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive.
Okay. Jesus repeated several things that he did in his lifetime for the disciples' effort. This is one of those. The earlier fig tree, when we talked about that, what did he tell them? He told them the same thing. If you say to this mountain, be removed, it be removed into the sea. Here, he's just telling them, you need to understand what's going on, and you have that power. He's trying to show them, you have that power, you have that authority. We have that today. I don't know anybody that really uses it because we don't see the miracles that they did back then. Through time and through our unfaithfulness, maybe, I don't know, we don't see that type. There are a few people, we've had the miracle services, that happens and things like that. I don't know that.
I still remember that scripture in the Word that says, These things shall you do, and greater.
Greater things.
And I've always thought, where is the greater? I'd like to see it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that he was trying to teach his disciples.
I did see on the internet one day, and I believe it was true, a man was praying for a girl who had a leg shorter than the other one. Did you ever see that on the internet?
I've heard of that.
I saw it on the internet where her legs started growing out. If that was not doctored up or anything, it looked real.
We don't see it over here. As Jerry was saying Sunday night, they are experiencing revival everywhere. Where he has went is Peru, Bolivia, El Salvador, I'll get it right in a minute. One of them not South American, Central American countries. But he did say Peru, I believe, too, and some of the others. And also, of course, where he went, over in Poland. It's one thing he was telling us. He said, if you have a church of 100, where he went to visit, and then they prayed they wanted to see reward, well, then Russia bombed, and they had thousands of people in their church because all the Ukrainians was coming over, to Poland. So your church just
Filled up.
It did. It filled up, and that. Sometimes we're amazed at what God does, and it's like, why are you amazed? Because He said He could do it. If we would just pray.
We have gotten hardened.
We have.
We have, we can go to doctors in some of these countries. They either have to have faith
or they die.
Yeah. I know many years ago when I first went to Owasso, I joined a little health club, and there was a deacon and a former pastor of one of the First Baptist Church there in Owasso. And we were talking afterwards. We'd go work out, then go eat biscuits and gravy. But we were talking, and how most all of us, we've got our little bit here, and that's right, and they're wrong.
Right.
Okay. And we were talking about they had another friend that was a minister of the same denomination, but he said he was down in South America somewhere, and he had been talking to the pastor, and he said, well, when you go down there and you need prayer, you don't go you don't spend your time looking for, if you're Baptist, but you know somebody there, and it doesn't make any difference what they go by. You know they can pray. You go there and you guys pray. And he said, you know, you're hungry and you need God, and you need, and we've got to the place that we really almost feel like we don't need God. Right. You know, our country is blessed, and
well, it's like today. Well, I can watch it online, or I can watch it on television and get all that. No.
Disaster sometimes brings people
What does?
to the church or whatever. They may not get saved, but at least they start seeking out something.
Well, they start seeking better ways.
I've been wondering about this war in Israel. If they're calling on God, I haven't heard a thing about it. I've been wondering if they have been calling on God, any of them. And
I've seen. They said that there was one when they called up the reservists. Said this one guy. It was down in the south part. He said he knew he hated to get the guns that they provided for him, because he said they once they finished with them, they'd put them up, they would clean them, they would fix them, they would do anything like this. And he got his gun, and he said, "Man, I sure hope this," because they was going into fight Hamas right then. They was heading down to it, and he said his gun performed perfectly. And he said it shot, it did everything. Took out some people, and once they got back off that assignment, got it back, they went back to the range to finish cleaning up. And he said that gun jammed every time he tried to hit. And he said he had to fix it, go to the armor, and it would not work, and they had to fix it. And he said, miracles are happening over there. We just don't hear about it. And so it's just, I don't know whether it's they realize, but they still believe in God, some of them, and I think they're calling upon Him. We just don't hear it. And He is answering their prayers.
Well, so many people, when God performs a miracle, they want to visually see it.
Right.
To believe it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And a lot of times it's not that way.
Yeah.
So they know, if you say God gave me a miracle and you say how, unless they can visually see that happened,
well, that's what He did with Thomas. He said, you want to see it, here it is. I'm alive, it's me.
Yeah, exactly.
And he said, put your hand right in here. And then he said, but blessed are those that don't have to see.
Back during one of the past wars that Israel was in, I heard that one of the, I don't know if he was a leader in the military or what he was, but somebody said, boy, God sure did bless y'all that, or did something for y'all in this war. God didn't do this for us. We did this ourselves.
Yeah.
Self-righteous.
Well, they are those. There are still those. So. Well, let's go to 23. And when he was coming to the temple, the chief priests and elders of the people came unto him as he was teaching, and said, but what authority dost thou these things, and who gave thee this authority? And Jesus answered and said unto them, I also will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, whence was it? From heaven or of men? And they reasoned with themselves, saying, if we say, from heaven, he will say unto us, why did ye not believe him? But if we say, of men, we fear the people, for all hold John as a prophet. And they answered Jesus and said, we cannot tell. And he said unto them, neither tell I by you what authority I do these things. So, he's kind of like, I've told you many times, I do what my Father tells me to. But now you want to, and he has kind of got him in a catch-22. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you unless you tell me why you didn't believe John, or who you think he is. And that's what he was trying to do. The religious leaders at that time, they didn't recognize John, although, like you said, all the people did. They recognized him as a prophet. And Herod was the one that had him killed after his little, party that he had. So, they're seeing these miracles happen in the temple with him. They're hearing about these other things that happen, and they're telling him, what authority do you have? And it's just like you haven't been following me, have you? I've been telling you all along. So he told them in a way, and he told the disciples, for those that have ears, let them hear, and they will understand. The Pharisees and Sadducees aren't listening. So, in order to cast more light upon that, he continues on with what? A parable. Okay, let's go ahead and read the next one, Brother Everson.
But what think ye? A certain man had 2 sons. He came to the first and said, Son, go work today in my vineyard. He answered and said, I will not. But afterwards he repented and went. And when he came to the second and said likewise, and he answered and said, I go, sir, and went not. Whether of them twain did the will of his father? They said unto him, the first. And Jesus said unto them, Verily I say unto you, that the publicans and the harlots go into the kingdom of God before you. For John came to you in a way of righteousness, and you believed him not. But the publicans and the harlots believed him, and ye, when ye had seen it, repented not afterwards, that ye might believe him.
Okay? Pretty up front, isn't it? He's telling them, look, if you had somebody, and you had, a family, and 2 sons, and you got to go work my field, and the first one said, no, I don't want to. But then after a little while, he got, I better go do it. Dad needed to do it, so he did it. The second one was a little more, the first one may be a little up, no, I'm not going to do that. The second one was, yes, sir, I'll go do that, but he didn't. Even though he was polite and the father kind of understood that he was going to go do it, he didn't do it. This is the difference between the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the rest of the people. The rest of the people was accepting him as who he was. He was telling them, he was doing these things, all that. But the Pharisees and them wouldn't. And he told them, if you would have believed John like they did, then you would understand where I get my authority. But you don't, so I'm not. So he puts it down hard.
I love that part there where he said that he spoke to the sons individually.
Yeah.
He does. He speaks to us
Each
individually. He calls us and he speaks to us individually.
Uh-huh.
It's also an example of the first time you realize disobedience.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to do his own way, do it his own time, so he disregarded what his dad wanted him to do for a while.
But they were both disobedient. One didn't do what he told him to do.
Right, exactly.
I mean, he told him he wasn't going to do it, but he went ahead and did it. So he's telling his father, no, I'm not going to. But then the other one did, said he would, and he didn't. So which one's the worst, like they said?
But it's a good sign of
Yeah.
disobedience.
Yeah.
Good example of it.
Yep. It says the shock value of Jesus' statement can only be appreciated when the low esteem in which tax collectors were held, not to mention prostitutes, which is taken into account. These proud religionists should have repented all the more when they saw the notorious sinners repenting, but they didn't. So we see one of those things that they didn't want any change, as we talked to before. I'm going to go ahead and read this last one since it's come along. I think it's the last one. Well, one more after that. Here another parable, so he doesn't let up on it. Okay, he just tells them another one. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard, hedged it round about, and digged a wine press in it, built a tower, let it out to husbandmen, and went into a far country. And when the time came of the fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the husbandmen, that they might receive the fruits. And the husbandman took his servants and beat one, killed another, and stoned another. Again he sent other servants, more than the first, and they did unto him likewise. But last of all he sent unto them his son, saying, they will reverence my son. But when the husbandmen husband saw the son, they said unto themselves, among themselves, This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and let us seize on his inheritance. They caught him, cast him out of the vineyard, and slew him. When the Lord therefore of the vineyard cometh, what will he do unto those husbandmen? They said unto him, He will miserably destroy those wicked men, and will not let out his vineyard into other husbandmen, and will let out his vineyard unto other husbandmen, which shall render him the fruits of their seasons. So in this particular one, it's an allegory, if you want to say it that way, of what was going on with them. God had came, give him everything, give the people everything they wanted, Israel everything they wanted, and all they had to do is manage it. Then it came time for the harvest, and God wanted his part. And he sent, who did he send to them? He sent the prophets. So they would be his servants to come, and he wanted some to start people. What he's saying is he wanted the people to come start serving him. Well, they would beat the prophets. They beat prophets. They killed prophets. They did a lot of bad things to it. Then he said, finally, he sent his son. Just like him. He's sending his son. He hadn't even done it yet, as far as being killed, but they sent his son, which was him, and they killed him too. So what's God going to do with Israel? What was he telling them they're going to do? They answered it itself. Well, they're going to beat the snot out of him and give it to somebody else. Ta-da, enter the Gentiles. If you won't believe it, I'm going to give it to other people that will.
Set them up, they walked right into it.
They did. They walked right into it. They said what was going to happen, and they will render those fruits in due season.
But they were warned. I mean, you just didn't want to do it.
They didn't want to do it. They were too ingrained in the 300 and 400 years of history, and even more of that. Most of it was in the early part, though, the 300, 400 years before Christ, where they developed all this other than the law and the prophets. They did.
Their own way.
Well, their extra that they threw in on top of everything. Just like they said they couldn't walk so far. They couldn't do all this so far. The Bible said you had to rest on Sunday, but it didn't put anything else on it. The other guys started adding all these other things. We was telling them when we went over to Israel, I don't know if you know this, but on the Sabbath, all the elevators will go up and down constantly all day, and it'll stop on every floor. Because if you push a button, that's work. That's right, that's what they believe. So every time, they usually had not all the elevators, but some of the elevators had to have a Shabbat elevator. And you knew that's the one for the Jews. They would go in that one. And we went in that one because all the others were cram-packed. So we went on that one to get up to our floor, even though it stopped on every floor.
And it opened the door on every floor.
It did.
Oh, wow.
Even if nobody got off or nobody got on. And they knew on Shabbat they had to do that.
The one thing that they did back during Christ's time and all that law that God gave them, they added their own laws.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
They just made up
It wasn't laws, it was their
own
rules,
regulations.
that's right.
And one of them, I think we learned down in Tulsa was, I think one of them was a kiss the nose of a mule was another one for some reason. I don't remember what it's for, but I thought how stupid, you know.
Yep. So let's go ahead and read the last 4 verses, and that's 21. Jesus saith unto them, Did ye never read in the Scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, the same is become the head of the corner? This is the Lord's doing, and it's marvelous in our eyes. Therefore say I unto you, the kingdom of God shall be taken from you, and given to a nation, bringing forth the fruits thereof. And whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind to a powder. And when the chief priests and Pharisees had heard the parable, they perceived that he spake of them. Duh. But when they sought to lay hands on him, they feared the multitude because they took him for a prophet. So there the crowd was with him, and it got him out of the strait because they wasn't going to go after him with the crowd there. But he was telling them straight out front, yeah, this is you. You guys are going to, because you have done it this way for so long, you have rejected prophets, you've rejected John the Baptist, now you're rejecting the Son that the Father has sent, and you're going to be replaced. New husbandmen are going to come in and take them out and take a new nation.
I have a cassette tape several years ago from Dave Reaver that really blessed me. It's a dream that a man had, and it's called The Magic Fountain. And it starts off with some kind of a ball going on, something like that. And these three old hags, where he starts the story, he talks about three old hags. And they're rummaging through garbage cans looking for something to eat.
Oh.
And one of them finds a letter in there, and he comes up and says, "Look here what I found. We're rich." And this other hag looks at the other one and says, "You look rich," and said something about half a brain. One of them had half a brain or something like that. But anyway, they decide, it's kind of like the yellow brick road, they start to pursue the king's son, and they take off to the castle to find the king's son. It's quite a story. It's a long, lengthy story. But at the end, it's very touching. I just weep when I hear the last of it. Turns out it's about Jesus. But anyway, they get to the castle, and